Hey everybody, John Bernakevitch here with All Points Design. That's allpointsdesign.ca, and Neil Bertrando of RT Permaculture. We're here talking today about the Oregon State University Permaculture Design course, and we're taking a look at assignment 9. Is that right, Neil? Is this number 9? Yeah.
Yep.
Number 9, the soil survey. So this assignment is really about a first foray. If you're not into soil science, if you have no great aspirations to become an agrologist, that's okay. This is just a first foray, a first introduction. What we're trying to present to you is that there's a whole body of knowledge about soil science that can help inform decisions on your site. So what we're asking you to do is to go out and to find information about the soil survey that exists on your land. Now, for students that primarily work with me, I tend to work with the international students, the Canadians and the internationals. And the soil survey can be poor, or can be old, or can be outdated, or all three, and normally hard to find. So that's okay. It just means that those of us that are international or Canadian, which technically outside of the US is still international, we have to take a little bit more time, a little bit more work, and it's not as slick and easy as the Americans with the NRCS soil survey site. But there are usually something by province for the Canadians. So in BC, it's called the Soil Sift, SIFT, and across the provinces, everybody's kind of catching up with soil science. If you're international, a lot of the Nordic countries, the North countries, the Central European countries have really good soil science, usually underneath a country-wide designation or a country-wide agrologist association. As we move into Africa and as we move into Asia, these become a lot harder to find. That's okay if you can't find it and it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. What you'll want to do then is just make a general observation about the soil, talk to neighbors, talk to individuals around that maybe have worked in mining or logging. They tend to have a good sense about what the soil strata is like, or if there's any geologist around, that's another great source to find information about soil science. So again, this isn't to overwhelm, but there's a lot of information in soil, and there's a lot of different classifications. And so while you might see on your site, there might be 4, 5, 6 different types of soil, we just want you to understand that those soil types exist, that there's different depths, there's different parent materials, and that may affect the different type of implements, the interventions, and the different types of analysis that you're doing within this soil survey. So again, take a deep breath. Doesn't need to be so overwhelming. We're not bringing in any math until the rainwater assignment. So, take a deep breath and just realize that it's just an introduction. Neil, any sort of meta thoughts before we get into some of the examples?
Yeah, no, I think it's an introduction. Also, there's some very specific things we're asking for, like a typical profile or some sort of thing like that. If you don't have the capacity to get that remotely, then you can also dig that on your site and measure the layers of the soil when you see texture or color changes. And a big part of what we want you to do here is to think about and reflect on what the information that you have is and what it tells you in relationship to your soil jar test and or compost resources, so that these suite of assignments that you're looking at are surrounding soil and soil health and soil biology are integrated, and you have some good reflections on how you might use them on your site or through your design planning.
Awesome. Great. How about you show us the first American example, and then we'll go back and forth between American and international.
Okay, sounds great. So I'm going to share my screen here. Hopefully it's up now.
Looks good.
Okay, great. So this is a great example because it has a clear title block again. It's not in a complete portfolio like we're asking you to do, so that would be even more helpful. But it is nice, crisp, and clean with the title block. This is a large site, so it's complex. It has many different soil types. This is a soil map from the Web Soil Survey program that hopefully Andrew has provided detailed instruction for your ability to go through and get this map. As you can see, there's many different soil types. So he mentions that there's primary use zones, and he's just going to look at some of them. And that's totally sufficient for this assignment. You know, if you've got 15 soil types, we don't expect you to analyze every single one. We want you to go through the practice of looking at one or two, and then you can go back to the other ones if you're doing specific design or management implementation for that area. So on the next page, you can see that he's got the sub map where he's highlighted the two that are his primary soil types of interest. And then he's also highlighted them in this soil survey table, which comes from the same page where you get your soil survey map on the web soil survey. So he screenshot both those, got them in there, and highlighted the ones that are of interest and for the specific exercise. So clearly labeled. Those are going to be 3022, which is bong, ashy, sandy loam, moist 0 to 8% slopes, right? So that within that, there's a lot of information. The slope type, some soil moisture type, soil texture, as well as a name, which is often named either by a person or a feature or something like that in the area. So the individual name bong is not, doesn't give us actual information about the soil so much. Just the unit, which is consistent across, you know, a decent amount of area. And then 3132, which is a different soil type. So he looks at each one individually and puts this profile here. This profile is part of what's called the map unit description in the web soil survey program, and it gives you lots of information. So the profile is the cross-sectional information about the soil. At 0 to 11 inches down, it's ashy sandy loam. It changes at 11 inches to 22 inches to sandy loam, and at 22 to 28 inches to gravelly, coarse sandy loam. And then again, this is odd that it's off to the side here. It changes a third time to the C horizon. So these are horizons A, horizon B, horizon B, C horizon, C horizon. C horizon is 28 to 60 inches, and it's coarse sand. So if you dug a hole, you'd expect to find a gravelly layer at about 22 to 28 inches is what this is telling us. And sometimes there's a hard pan or there's rock there or something like that. So this can be really useful information for you to understand the quality of your soil at depth without having to dig a hole. And then you can dig a hole and double check it. There's all sorts of other information here. And I encourage you to, you know, get familiar with it at a way that's comfortable for you, but it's not critical to know right now. You know, just keep putting it into your portfolio will allow you to come back to it with easy access. You know, things like depth to water table. If you're in a wetland, your depth to water table might be, you know, 6 to 12 inches or 24 inches, and that's going to dramatically affect your capacity to select plants for that area. So I'm going to keep moving through here. Here's this second one, and again, very, you know, easy to understand. The same format as the first one, actually the same profile. So, you know, those two soils have a lot of similarity. They're both in the bong unit. This one is steeper slopes. So really the main difference between these two soil types he selected is that there's just a difference in slope. Other than that, they're very similar. And then he compares it with his soil jar test and makes some comments about things that he has observed about his soil and some reflections that he has on his soil from the soil survey integrated with the soil jar test and the compost resources. So for example, he says how they differ, and then it's confirmed in the jar test that one has slightly less sand and more silt, right? So the Phoebe series soil should hold slightly more water volume. You know, I'm not positive that that's an accurate reflection, but at least it starts the process of thinking about and reflecting on it and comparing it with the soil jar test and using actual data that he has, that there is more silt in one than the other, to make a deduction. Then he can go and test that deduction if he likes. So that's a good process, to take some observations, compare information, use actual data that you have, and then make a deduction, and then go and test that deduction. So that's all I have on this assignment. Javan, would you like to comment on it at all?
Yeah, this is a great example of showing the macro to the micro. They didn't necessarily go through every single one of the soil types. That would be a bit excessive on this site and for this course. If you were doing an in-depth design for this site and you were looking at treatment for every single one of these areas, absolutely, it makes good sense. But they chose the two around the main home site and decided to go in depth. They gave us a sense as readers what those areas were as they were going through the classification, and then they gave us a nice comparison at the end. This is everything you could ask for. Really nice, as usual. Things that could be improved upon. It'd be great to see a date. Be great to see an author, and again, great to see this in a portfolio. Would be great. So yeah, Neil, great example. Thanks so much.
You bet. Let me comment on a couple other things based on this specific example. That you just raised the point that they selected the two soils that are around their main home site and site of influence. And they actually, this student isn't doing a design for the whole site. Are doing a detailed design for just that portion of the site. So they've identified the soil types which are relevant to their detailed design, which is a great way to do it. And then also on the web soil survey, they've outlined their site boundary, rather than getting information that's in addition to their site boundary. And that will just help you manage the amount of data that you're getting from the web soil survey. Because if you make a big box for your area of interest, you're likely to get some information that isn't specific to the site. And right now it's already so much information. I recommend you just get the stuff that's specific to the site and most relevant to your design project.
Yeah, great points. The last thing I'll say about that, which is a good piece for people to think about, is sometimes it's useful to take a look at your soil areas before you do your soil test. I know that they're out of order. The soil shake jar test is first and the soil survey is two after the compost. But doing the soil survey first, or at least understanding the different areas, can give you a sense of where you might want to take soil samples. So consider that. I wanted to show you a great example here from the UK. So this was an excellent assignment because it gave us a sense of the three different soil types that were in general area of the assignment. I'm just going to spotlight my cursor here. So we have the main one being this Andover one, shallow, well-drained, silty soils over chalk and slopes and crest. So they gave us a sense of the component series and the profile. So taking a look at Andover and the Coombe, they showed us where it was coming from, general description, distribution over England and Wales, comparison of soil series, hydrological features, which is one of the main things we want to know about, free draining, the parent material, where it comes from, what kind of fertility there might be. And now you're not always going to get all this information for areas that have had a lot of time, geopolitical areas that have had a lot of time on their areas. They tend to do a lot of detailed analysis, the British more so. So they've given us a sense of the resources of where this information has come from, and then the commentary. So speaking about what they've seen. So as Neil was talking about last time, you make an observation, make an assessment, and at some point there's going to be a recommendation or a treatment that might come from it. So speaking about fertility, composting, what they might do, and then comparison. So again, taking a look at the comparison is one of the biggest things. Taking the big pattern of the soil samples, the soil survey, to your soil samples, and then getting a comparative analysis is really important. As usual, great titling, great address, assignment, and name and date. So really appreciate those pieces on this assignment. Neil?
I want to second that. The layout and formatting of this assignment is excellent. It's really easy to see the information, the soil profile, all the descriptions relative to the soil itself, and the commentary, as well as the comparison. Quick and easy to get oriented. That's great. I really like that they have graphical profiles that they've gotten from their soil survey resource. And one of the things that I think is most important is that these surveys are done on a large scale. So it's not like somebody went from plot to plot and dug up a hole and did an actual analysis of the soil on that specific location. So they're generalities. And the reason you want to compare it with your soil jar test is that now you can get some ground truth that's actual real world data, and make sure that the soil survey information you're getting is actually appropriate and relevant to your site, because either the scale might not be totally accurate and you might be in a slightly different soil type, or your site soils may have been disturbed over time and things might have been changed, or they might have been mixed. So what you're dealing with is what you actually sample on the site. And this can inform the different depths that you sample and the locations on the site that you sample if you have different soil types. But you also want to make sure that you design a response to the specific data that you've collected for your site, and not just based on the web resource.
Great Great points, Neil. How about you show us another American example?
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so this is a sample again, just a screenshot of the soil survey, and they have their site. It's a smaller urban site, and so they just have put a point location on it. I'd like to see the outline of the actual site on here if possible, and that would be easiest to do in the program using the area of interest tool. You just outline your site, make your area of interest your site, not this larger area. But they just have one soil type, 174 it looks like. I'd like to see a date, address, that sort of stuff here. And or 114 is what their one soil type was. And so, you know, they've selected their map unit setting. And in this one, I selected this one specifically because it doesn't give a typical profile. And the map unit composition is urban land, right? 114 urban land. So if you're in an urban area, a lot of times that area will have been dramatically disturbed, soil scraped off, so fill brought in, all sorts of stuff. And so this is the type of information you're going to get, and it's not going to be hugely informative about your site soils. So, you know, I just wanted to present this, that, you know, if you're in an urban area, and this isn't even that urbanized, that you may get something like this, and do not worry and try, you know, scratch your head about trying to figure out the profile. Just comment that it's an urban land area, there's not a profile provided, and then think about how that might integrate with your observations for your site based on your soil jar test and test holes that you've done. And then again, they have their commentary that looking at my compost resources, the location the soil sample was taken from, that sort of stuff. She took it from a raised bed using imported soil. So I recommended that she go back and do one for the actual site soils. Again, this is about developing competencies. So doing the jar test again is not a bad thing. It just means that you're getting better at it. And you're able to compare different results of the jar test and think through how those actually affect your design and management responses to the site setting. And then again, she looks at the compost resources, advantageous through the entire garden to do intense mulching and composting, which is great. Always add organic matter is kind of a general motto. You know, if you're in a soil that has high levels of organic matter, that's not necessarily a great thing, but in general, adding organic matter and increasing the soil life and biota on your site soils is going to be a win for almost any soil type. Javan, thoughts?
No, yeah, you've covered all of the things I would say about this, both good and bad. Great example. Thanks, Neil.
Okay, you bet.
I'm going to share an example here that has pros and cons, and I'm also going to share how I would have gone about this myself. So kind of showing you some of the background of what we do now. So this was out in Qualicum Beach on the Vancouver Island, just off the west coast of British Columbia, and they've done a lot of good digging. They've literally dug up the soil survey from 1959, taken the area, landmarked where they were. They didn't necessarily place it within the context of this. I would have liked to have seen where that was. They did give us a recap of the shake jar test with a photograph, threw down a ruler so we get a sense of the different areas, and showed some of these areas. The second difference was the quality of decaying cedar. Fantastic. You know, like to see that, like to see those observations, gives us a sense that we know what's going on. One difference was the size of rocks in the upper layer. So there's no doubts that between this assignment, which happened some good 60 years after the fact, is going to be different than what the soil type is. So we got a sense of the soil type, we got a sense of the profile. They brought the photo in, which I really appreciated as well. They worked with another soil survey. So again, if you are not in the States, chances are you're going to have to take a look at multiple resources. So this was a different one in '89. Great to see. So lots of great things here that I really appreciated. I would have liked to have seen a smaller area where the design site was. And although it's already in their site survey, they've already shown me where these site samples are. I would have liked to have seen which one this was. I'm going to guess it's number 1, but bring that back in here and saying this is number 1, that would have helped me with a bit of the comparative analysis. Yeah, overall, really good assignment. I appreciated what they brought here. Neil?
I think I really like that it's all on one page. They've done a great job of combining both the text and the graphics to convey the information and keep it consolidated and easy to take in. And I also really like the side-by-side comparison of the test hole with the typical soil profile. And that way they can get an understanding of if their site is accurately represented by the typical profile or if there is some deviation from that, and they can make some appropriate adjustments to their response.
Awesome. Awesome. So I'm going to just share a little bit of the tool that I use. Cool. So Google Earth Pro is an exceptional tool to use. If you're interested in learning, if it feels like an overwhelm, don't use it. I'll say that again. If it feels like an overwhelm, don't use it. The point here is to build competency, not to add more that you need to learn. This is a client site. It's a butterfly valley. So downstream is this way. And sure enough, right at the divide of where the creek is, you have these two soil types. Now, the great thing about the way that the architecture of Google Earth works is that you can order things by what's called the scale of permanence, which you have been introduced to already. So underneath the soil and underneath existing, what I've done here is take the BC soil survey sift, which comes in a KMZ, KML file, and place them onto my landscape so I can get a good sense of treatment protocol for each side of this property. The great thing is that when you bring it in, it comes with all the data that you would need to talk about in terms of the texture, the drainage, the soil. There's a fertility here, there's an elevation data, and it gives you a more, a broader scale, I won't say more, but broader scale conversation, understanding this data. So if you need more information, if you want to have the soils of the Ashcroft area report that was done in the late 70s, I believe. It's a while since I worked on this project, but it has lots of conversation. So at least in British Columbia, we have a nice importable element like we see in the NRCS that we can put directly into Google Earth Pro. And because of that, I can use that. I can overlay different elements upon this map so I can see how they might interact with each other. And as Neil was talking about, observation, gather all the information, start to overlap, and then we can start to do a little bit of analysis. And that's one of the reasons why I like Google Earth so much. And the Pro version is still free. So it's a nice tool to learn, and it's nice to start to get into some of the GIS conversation that's happening in a broader scale and is advancing by leaps and bounds. Like every month I check back in, so I tend not to check anymore because it's always so far beyond what I have the time to learn about. But anyways, I wanted to show that to folks to get a sense that usually you can find this information and port it in, or you can draw a polygon, you can overlay the image just like we saw back in Qualicum Beach. They could have overlaid that image. They could have drawn out the boundary generally where it was on their site as well as they could approximate. And then they could have entered in that information manually. And again, it's all about having a program or a map set that you can go to quickly and go back for design work. And that's one of the reasons why I use Google Earth Pro, because it's easy to come back and see the layers. Neil, I know you've, truthfully, I took a lot of my architecture from your work. I have to give credit where credit is due. Any thoughts or conversations you wanted to add to that?
On the Google Earth Pro, there should be a link in the resources for this assignment to the Web Soil Survey KMZ or KML for Google Earth Pro for the United States. So if you are a United States student, I recommend loading that into your Google Earth, locating your site. And then that, when you click on the different soil types on your site, when you have that polygon checked and open and active, it will bring up a cross-sectional profile graphic that you can screenshot. And so you can get some quick information on your site from that as well.
Beautiful. I've got it here. So I'll just click it on to show folks. And then I'll get out of Canada and move ourselves into the Americas. And yeah, we've got our big areas. And as we get closer, it's just thinking, there we go. So
yeah, it takes a while to load it up, and there's different resolutions as you zoom in. Sometimes the lines change, so there's different maps at different scales that are integrated into this overall tool.
And this is what Neil was talking about. Great to see that profile in 3D. And then again, you can go directly to where this information is, brings it up, gives you a good sense of the horizon and the conversation, so you can go in and out. So wonderful resource that that the Americans have. And for all you other countries out there who are listening, because there's so many of you. Get on it, would you? Neil, how about another American example?
Okay. I just want to state that the Web Soil Survey, as well as the National Soil Survey that was done on the ground and then turned into the Web Soil Survey, is one of the best uses of US tax dollars that I've ever found. So before we go into another assignment example, I want to just pull up the Web Soil Survey and show you a site, for example, here in Reno that I have. Hopefully I'll get I marked it off ahead of time. It might have expired on me. So I'm going to just do a quick recap of this. So I use the area of interest tool. I use the polygon tool. I'm going to discard my unsaved content. And then I just outline the site with the polygon tool quickly. That creates my area of interest for my site of interest. And I go straight to soil map. Here I get my soil map. It's got 3 soil types, a table, and I can add that to my shopping cart, which allows me to download this stuff later. So I would do that. It's quick and easy. The next thing that I want to look at is the Soil Data Explorer. And I click on Soil Reports in the Soil Data Explorer, and the map unit description under the AOI, the Area of Interest Inventory, map unit description, view soil report. And now I've got the map unit descriptions for each type, 480, 669, and 590. And that's where you find the setting, the profile, properties and qualities, all sorts of information. So this is where you're getting the information that we're requesting. Just for a quick review of it, you should be able to then screenshot the typical profile out and put it into your portfolio. If you are unfamiliar with screenshots, I've added a link to a website that will show you how to take screenshots on all different operating systems as well to the help discussion. So check that out. And now to an assignment. So the assignments that I've shown, unlike Javan's, aren't in a portfolio. It'd be great to have it all on one page. That's always my preferred method because I can view it easily. So I'll often even change this to fit to one full page on my PDF. Makes it kind of small in this portrait layout. So landscape layout is also nice for viewing on a screen. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can see that. You can see this site has been the property boundaries outlined exactly for his site. And it has 2, 3 soil types. One is pretty much irrelevant. So I would just look at the 2 that are the main parts of the site. And then he's gone through and simply listed what those are and showed the typical profile and the setting. Again, you get lazier, stony loam, 6 to 25% slopes. So immediately I have an idea about how steep the land is and the soil texture, and then the map unit if other similar map units could come up for my other soils. And then the horizons. This one doesn't have the actual like ABC horizons with it. It just has H1, 2, 2, 2, 3. But stony loam, clay loam, and loam, and stony loam, and then unweathered bedrock. So pretty quickly you're hitting rock at this site, at this soil type, 5 to 15 inches down somewhere. So that doesn't give you a whole lot to play with. Also, you have 0 to 5 and 5 to 15 inches are 2 different profiles. So if you dug your test pit and it's like 8 inches, then now you're mixing soil textures, and your jar test might not accurately match your web soil survey typical profile or soil texture. So this is a great place where you can say, oh wait, I dug my hole deeper than this profile, now I've mixed them. Maybe I need to redo my jar test and compare it with this to see how accurate it is. And then finally, they have some thoughts in bullet point, which makes it easy to read. Based on description, not very conducive to ag activity. It's also, starting to get a little steeper. Limited based on bedrock. These are great analyses, things to be thinking about in response to this. And then he says results may or may not align with my jar test results. I'm not sure. His jar test result showed sandy clay loam soil. So here's where, you know, I would again be looking back, oh, maybe I didn't dig my hole to the right depth, and double check that and do another jar test basically. Because clay loam is similar to what he got. And also maybe his accuracy of his jar test wasn't the greatest. So I'd like to see a photo of the jar test here. So you know, I could also integrate that into my response. Javan?
You covered it. Thanks. That's great. All things I would be specific on as well. So yeah, great. I think I'll show one more, and I'll show you a non native English speaker, just to show a couple of examples about if you are in a country or you don't speak English as a first language, some translation that's necessary. So this is northwest of Aarhus, the second largest city in Denmark. Again, the information was readily available, but a lot of this had to be translated. So the student went ahead and translated so I could understand this was shifting sands, fresh water, and then as we get to the two areas, so there's kind of two areas here that we're seeing. We're taking a look at moraine sand gravel and moraine clay. So great to see. As soon as I see moraine clay, moraine sand gravel, because of my background, I know that we're looking with a glacial conversation and usually what was left over as glaciers receded. So it's already putting me in the right mindset. So again, if you speak a different language and if the information you find is in a different language, please do take the time to translate what we're seeing. And they might be words you've never seen before that take some time, but it makes a big difference for us helping you within your assignment. As we move down, they ended up finding a dig that was happening already in their area. So they went and took photos of it so we could see. Talked about moraine clay and the fact that based upon what they had found, that the soil on their site, even though it said it was supposed to be moraine sand, was actually moraine clay, which is very common in rural and urban areas that have had a lot of disturbance. So great to see. What are we missing? A nice comparison between the soil shake jar test. I'd love to see a photo. I'd love to see some comparison. They did talk about it, but I'd love to see a little bit more of that. But this is a great example of in a place where we don't necessarily know everything about your site. You have to become the primary observer, the primary detective and doctor of your site, and need to really understand. One thing I will say though is if your assignments in portfolio run 2, 3, 4 pages, just make sure to have something down here so I know that we're in the assignment. They did a nice color code, so I always know what color we're in. But it would be nice to have some information at the bottom, just all of this title information in a small block at the bottom. So we're always there, and some page numbers would have been nice as well. Neil?
I really appreciate this. Seeing the translation stuff is helpful. One thing it brings up for me is the cut that they found, which is really valuable. If you're in an area that has a lot of roads, especially maybe somewhere near your site specifically, road cuts can be really useful observational tools to understand a little bit more about your site and the soils in your area.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, folks, this was a bit of a longer one. The soil survey, I think Neil and I are trying to show as much examples as possible because there can be some confusion, but generally it's understanding that there's a pre-existing set of science around and observations around soil, trying to integrate that into your site, understanding where it is, showing it graphically, showing layers, and then starting to comprehend what that means for your site, for composting, for hydration, for runoff, for potential different hydrology layers that might be existing within the soil strata. So take your time, go easy, ask lots of questions, do lots of research. When you find a dead end, do more research, especially if you're not in the good old US of A, because you're going to have to do a bit of hunting, but it's worth it in the end because you will build more comprehension about your site. So thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.